Good evening. I'd like to bring the Oconee County Planning Commission meeting to order. Today is Monday, January 6th, 2025. I'd like to start with an invocation. Mr. Nick, actually, would you lead us in that, please?
Pray with me if you'd like to. Dearest Father, thank you for this new day, this new year. I pray we make good use of it, not for our own necessary benefit, but only by way of following you and loving our neighbor. That's where we find our greatest good. So help us to remember that as we do our work, as the Planning Commission does its work, that it has its eyes focused on the good of the community, apart from self-interest, and just what is for the good of this county. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. We can stand for the pledge. I'll start. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We've got the minutes before us from the December 2nd meeting. Do I hear an approval of those minutes?
So moved.
And the second?
Second.
Are there any changes to those or amendments to them? All those in favor of approving the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
All right. We do not have any non-agenda item public comments. So we'll move straight to commission member comments. I'd like to thank all people here tonight for being here on the first 2025 meeting. And that's all I have in particular. Anybody else have anything? No?
I'd just like to wish everybody a good year, 2025, and hope it's productive, and hope Oconee County moves forward, and especially when it comes to education of our young folks. To me, I'm hoping that'll really continue.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Next on the agenda is a discussion regarding scenic highway ordinance and potential changes or amendments. And I wanted to just start by saying something, and then we do have a couple of people that want to speak on that. In 2024, the Planning Commission reviewed an application for one of our roads to be provided as a scenic highway designation. And in working through that application process, it was apparent that there were some shortcomings regarding our current procedures within the ordinance. That procedure is section 26, lines 151 through 156 of the county. Excuse me. One observation that was made was that while many county citizens might enjoy driving down such a designated road, and therefore signing a petition of support, that there were contiguous property owners who would be directly impacted by such an ordinance. And whether that impact is positive or negative, it's secondary to the fact that those individuals with direct or contiguous impact should have an equal, if not more weighted, opinion as to the property owner simply enjoying the drive. And while the ultimate decision still resides with the Planning Commission, what we discovered was that the application process itself, there was no requirement of the applicant to identify or reach out to property owners that were going to be directly impacted in any way. And so that's kind of what a continuation of tonight's conversation will be, is do we need to, and if so, how do we make those adjustments? So anyway, I'd like to open it up here with public comments. We have 4-minute time limit on it. 1 minute remaining, we'll do this. Time's up, we'll do this. Mr. Markovich, you are up first.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Tom Markovich. This particular item interests me a great deal. I view the effects of changing an area to a scenic highway has the same effect as zoning a piece of property, because there are certain things that are all of a sudden you can no longer have billboards and that sort of thing. And so to me, it should be carried out the same way a rezoning would be taken. And as I was thinking about this, and I realized with the small area rezoning mechanism, it requires all the signatures of the people involved in it. I would argue that since council rezoned the entire county last year, there's problems with the idea of small area rezoning, or district rezoning for that matter, because there were certain mechanisms that were written into it, and this involved properties that could not, that were being rezoned for the first time from control-free. Well, that's no longer true, because the county unquestionably rezoned the entire control-free district. It is no longer a control-free district, period. I don't think that rezoning by the small area should matter at all. In fact, anybody should be able to, since they've already been rezoned, they should be able to go back just like any other person that's been able, who is rezoned, go back and apply for rezoning to whatever they want to go into and go ahead. They should not have to. I don't think that the small area zoning is valid, period. And so a lot more happened this past year when the county rezoned than just thinking that all they were doing was changing density in the control-free, because that's not true. They did far more than that. And there's no telling how deep the effects of this are going to go. That's all I got on this part. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mark Torres.
Good evening, I'm Mark Torres. I live in East Shore subdivision in District 1. We are on Rochester Highway, right in the middle of the stretch that was under consideration for a designation as a scenic highway. 15 of our 51 lots adjoin the highway, while the others are just across our neighborhood county road from it. It was mentioned at a recent meeting, I don't know if it's yours or the council, that there is a total of 53 contiguous property owners within this corridor. If that's the case, it would appear that we comprise over a quarter of them. East Shores participates in the Adopt a Highway program sponsored by COBA, led by our neighbors Lynn and Rick Hamilton. A few years ago, we received an award from COBA as Adopt a Highway Group of the Year. It was asked at a recent meeting, and again, don't recall if it's yours or the council, whether any of the existing Adopt a Highway organizations had picked up trash after the hurricane. We did. On October 5th, 1 week after the storm, 2 days after the power came back. We collected approximately 250 pounds of trash, including 2 2x4s, a long plastic gutter, and 2 tires. We feel like we're doing our part to maintain the beauty of that road for the benefit of all the citizens of Oconee County. We had hoped that you would lend your support to this effort. We were rather disappointed that you saw fit not to do so. As far as the proposal you're dealing with today, it seems to me it needs a little work. This contiguous thing, all of our lots are contiguous. Does that mean all 51 can participate in this petition? Does that mean we have 51 out of 53? I don't think that's the case, but a little confusing. And then Waterford subdivisions are just north of us, but we're not contiguous with them. Duke Energy has a little slice of land in between us. Does that mean we can't join in a petition with them? Not sure where you want to go with this, but this proposal needs a bit of work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so let's open it up for discussion here. Did you want to lead us off since you had led off last time?
Sure. So after reviewing the scenic highway ordinance and it being located in section 26, I think it leaves us with a question of what are the requirements. If we're going to leave it in 26, then I think it should be a unanimous agreement with the landowners, the affected property owners, because then it's clearly volunteer. If we are not going to allow it to be 100% approval of the affected landowners, then we need to move it over to 38, where it becomes a zoning issue. And the word in 38 should reflect that. Or, number 3, we can just remove it altogether and allow it to only be state scenic highway approval in Oconee County. So that's just where I see where we sit today.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that or provide clarification on?
I'll say something from the standpoint of, having worked with COBA. And by the way, I tried not to take any leadership role in anything that was presented to the Planning Commission. And I definitely didn't have any type of interest, of financial interest or anything. Just like any one of you, I'm interested in trying to make Oconee County better. I think there are a lot of people who wanted the scenic highway designation because of what it means, the pride in our community and that kind of thing. So, it was a difficult thing to maneuver as far as I could tell. And it was frustrating for a number of people in the community. Us not being clear, I think, about what the expectations were was a huge part of that. And I think we do need to make some changes so the public would know what to expect instead of just what happens to be on someone's mind at the time and making a requirement or some expectation that's not even written anywhere. It's not known ahead of time. It's just almost discovered as part of the process. So we definitely need to clear up some things for the community sake of anyone else that wants to try to get a scenic highway designation in the future. Now, personally, in trying to represent what I think is something that could help is not to require 100%, because I can see where somebody holding out would be like, well, it's nothing in it for me. What can you do to make it a benefit for me? I need to get my tractor fixed or whatever it might be. I'm just making this up. But the hypothetical situation would be somebody decides, well, everybody else wants to do it, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to sign, whatever their reason might be. And then there might be some negotiations that go on between someone that really wants it and that person that's holding out. So I don't think 100% would be the right thing. Personally, I'd like to see it maybe 80% or something that is a super majority. I think that's reasonable. But the way it is now, it's just, we need to make some improvements. Thank you.
Is there anyone else up here that has a statement before, or a question, or, because I'd like to make a statement before.
Yeah, I'll say something. I kind of agree to what Gary's saying. I think 100% of the people directly impacted need to be contacted and listened to, and even maybe contacted multiple times, either by first-class mail, public hearing notices, lines on their side, door knocking, whatever, multiple, just a great effort, and then see what the response is. But to expect 100% response rate, I think, is unrealistic. Council votes on ordinances, nothing's voted on 100%. We vote, it's always majority rule. BZA, it's the same thing. So I think 100% is a big ask and an unrealistic ask, but I think 100% notification, 100% effort, 110% effort to notify 100%, but to expect an answer, maybe act on what the majority comes back, whether it's 75 or whatever number we can agree on. I think that's reasonable. Otherwise, potentially nothing could get done. If you anticipate 100% agreement on everything, I can guarantee you pretty much nothing's ever going to get done. We can't even, I'm sure my brothers here on the commission could probably say they don't agree 100% within their own homes with their spouses and children and whatever, and you go to a bigger venue like this, it just doesn't, 100% agreement just doesn't seem realistic to me.
Go ahead.
So the reason the 100% came up is because the small area zoning, it's in section 38, that if you're gonna do small area zoning, you've got to have 100%. You're right. A lot of times, 100% of the people don't agree. And maybe in those times, we need to do nothing. So often, we compromise things that we should not. And private property rights, to me, is one of those things I feel we should not compromise on. It should be something that we safeguard for future generations and not give those God-given rights and freedoms away on a whim. Personally, I favor leaving it in section 26 with 100% participation. Because the last thing you want is a disgruntled landowner. I'm sure he could come up with some billboards that are well within the ordinance to voice his disgruntled opinion. That's the thing we got to think about. We need to protect the rights of that one individual. And I know it's up here, we're thinking, well, it's the betterment of the whole community. But the whole thing about us as citizens are not only taking care of the community, but also looking at the individual rights. And that's why in this ordinance, is it going to bring anything? Not really. But is it going to take something away? Yes. And that's what we need to look at. What are we taking away? What are we gaining? How can we destroy the community? Or how can we build up the community? If we go with 100%, we're going to be building up the community. If we go with less than 100%, there's a chance we're going to destroy that community over something that really means nothing other than a designation. So that's what you got to think about here today, is where do you stand on property rights?
Mr. Coley, this has been brought up as a zoning issue, both in this meeting and in previous meetings, especially with regard to some of the losses of property rights, with regard to the billboard and the junkyard and things like that. Can you just give the public a brief overview? If somebody was doing zoning, say turning something from a residential area to a commercial area, what is the zoning process as far as notification, and then is there some sort of contiguous vote that applies to some kind of zoning?
Yeah, so for rezoning, and I think everybody in here has actually been a part of a rezoning effort fairly recently. We did a couple last year. So for the small area rezoning, they need to come up with 50 contiguous acres that are all touching. The roads don't count, so if it's on one side of the road versus the other side of the road, that still counts as contiguous. If it's going through like a power line easement, that still counts as contiguous. So basically, you figure out the group and the acreage to get to that 50 acres. Everybody has to decide what they want it to go into, whether it's agriculture or lake residential or any of the districts that we have. They fill out the petition, they sign it, so yes, this is my address, this is my TMS number, this is my signature, all that's presented to us. We verify that, and then we give that to you as the planning commission to make a recommendation on. So that's just an up or down, we think this should happen, we don't. And then that gets sent to council. Council will pass that with 3 readings and a public hearing, or not.
And it's all must put their say on that application. Tell me that part one more time.
So there is a petition that has multiple signature lines, and if they need more than one page, they can, however many pages it takes to get to the 50 acres, or, if it's 30 people and they all have 10, 20, 50, 100 acres. It could be whatever that total acreage is, and the people that want to go into that district at that time.
Okay. So we do have a precedence with regard to a zoning issue as being
We also,
100%.
so that's put in the paper, there were signs placed at the adjacent properties and the cross streets that there is a rezoning hearing coming up for this, going from CFD to Lake Residential.
I have also one concern that I would have, and is specifically in the situation of 130, and I don't want us to dwell on 130 because this is a whole county-wide ordinance that could affect any future area that might be talked about. But using that as an example, I have often heard the Right to Farm Act, that you have a farmer here that has his 100 acres, and right next to it is a subdivision that just came in with 100 people in that subdivision, and it's just a sheer raw vote. You've got 100 people that are tired of the smell that the farmer is making, but the farmer does have his right to run his farm based on that. If we step below that 100% threshold, not that this is the same thing, but you could have a subdivision that is fine with it and a large property owner that may have a higher impact, that it is a one holdout. Now, is it a one holdout of a guy that has a half acre somewhere down the way and happens to be in the neighborhood or not happens to be in the neighborhood? I do think that HOAs and things like that already have rules in place that already restrict their ability to use the land as they see fit. And the people that live within that subdivision are very comfortable with their land being restricted, or they wouldn't be in that to begin with. So I do think that those kind of things weigh in. Mr. Root, can you help us and share any more information as far as kind of understanding, do we need to make this 100% vote? Do we need to make this based on acreage or volume or impact? What things should we be considering here?
I think you're considering everything that you need to consider. And I listened to the meeting twice, and I know there's a direction to redline up what Mr. Haney had proposed. I couldn't do that without y'all fleshing out the answers to these questions. And I see them as fundamentally two questions. One, who can apply, and the nature of the applicant, the legal interest in, and percentage of the owners. Also, which we haven't really talked about contiguity, but you can talk about contiguity property to property, contiguity to the road, adjacent to the road, touching the road. But then there's also, there's going to be different properties that have an interest in the corridor that might be behind or somewhere situated. I haven't heard y'all talk about that. So pinning down the nature of the applicant, obviously what you're doing now, and then the nature of the notice. I mean, it's really just a policy issue. Y'all tell me what you want to do with that, and I can put it into an ordinance. The issues you popped out on both sides are real. Legal interest, that's a difficult interest to define. It was in the original rewrite. A legal interest in property can be an easement, can be a lease, can be anything. You get a bundle of sticks, we're taught in law school. The sticks are all the various rights to the property. Those are all legal interests. We give them away all the time. We give, our utility companies legal interests in our property. So defining the nature of the legal interest, we're going to have properties that 10 people own an interest in. Whittling that down so you can get, who has the voice for the property, signs up, as opposed to a minority interest. And then just making sure you get the notice. In my mind, I think it makes perfect sense. I don't think the notice is a hard question, is to do a mailing to everybody and to post along the corridor, to post signs along the corridor. But so it goes back to that. I think, in my mind, that's what you should do for it, for notice. But it goes back to that 100%. I don't have an answer from a legal perspective on what is better. I know it will be harder at 100%, obviously, and it may never happen.
So and I'm going to say true zoning change, this is a true zoning change as well, but as was mentioned, it's a scenic highway, and as it stands now, doesn't have a whole lot of teeth of lots of impact compared to changing something from residential to commercial, or from agriculture to residential, or something of that nature. At the same time, hold on just a moment, at the same time, if we do give 100% vote, then we're easily wiping our hands of it, because unless you bring 100%, we have nothing to be voting on. As it stands now, this committee does have the right to listen to the opinion of lots of folks and then make a decision based on the best interest of the entire county. I'm going to let Mr. Nix say something, but I don't know how that should necessarily be addressed. Should we be stopping at the notification stage, for example? Mr. Nix?
So, is this a zoning change? Are we changing the rules on what already establishes this zoning process? So we already have an ordinance in place that does this zoning, but it's not as restrictive as what we have proposed. It doesn't include the property owners. It doesn't go through the process of zoning that should be gone through. That's where we are. Anything that we put in place with respect to property rights is going to be better than what we already have, because what we already have could potentially create the scenic highway without the consent of many along it. And that's almost that could have happened had we not recognized it. That's the reason we're changing what we have now in place to this.
Well, the dilemma I see is, where does it belong? And there's another side to this. So let's say the conditions along that highway change to so it's no longer certified as a scenic highway. So that, what we're calling zoning that was put in place, goes away. So does it belong in 26, or does it belong in 38? Or should we just remove it altogether?
Well, the other thing I was thinking, if it's a true zone issue, we have a matrix that shows where all of our current zones go. Where does the scenic highway zone go on the matrix? Does it fit on the matrix? I don't think so. It's a public road with one restriction, and that'd be billboards.
And junkyards.
And junkyards, yeah.
So
So if it can't go on the matrix, is it a zone? Is it a zoning issue?
Was a restriction of property rights. And that's, Ms. Root, if we had 100% participation, would it work in 26?
Yeah, for me, the chapter numbers don't mean a lot.
Okay.
In the name. So if it's a zoning ordinance, it's a zoning ordinance, and one can make an argument for 1 through 40, there are zoning elements in just about every one of those. If you're going to talk about the impact on somebody's rights to their property, you can find an argument for it. So it's really a matter of how it walks and how it talks, and that's what y'all got to flesh out. It's fine being on 26. I think you just add the notice provisions. I don't see it as a rezoning that you would have to put it into 38. Yeah, it has aspects of property controls, right? But in 26, you just put whatever y'all come up with who the applicant is going to be, the nature of the applicant, and the notice provisions. It's fine there. You just got to make sure it fits, right, and does what you want it to do. And I was thinking back as you're going, the obvious ones are, you don't have to have a percentage of ownership. It's just county council gets the applicant, they're satisfied with it, and they pass it. Or 100%, or somewhere in between, 80 or 75, the supermajority. In annexations, they also have, you can come in with a lower percentage and have a vote. They do it by election or referendum. I'm not saying we conjure up something like that. I'm just trying to think there are different ways that people approach a similar issue. So you get a threshold of applicants, just like the referendum for Corn Charlotte. They had to get 15%, and then they can have a vote. If they got 14%, they don't go to the next step. So there's different ways. What's the best? I don't know. It depends what the end goal is. If you want to make it easy, probably as it is now, but we've had one, yeah. Yeah, 1 in 10 years, I guess, that I've seen go through. Yeah.
Let me say something real quick, if I may. It sounds like Mr. Root, one, needs some things to be able to start plugging in, first and foremost. From a low-hanging fruit standpoint, it clearly sounds like that that right now, one of the missing elements seems to be no notification, that the applicant can simply make the application, bring it in front of us, and there's no requirement of notification. And so from a low-hanging fruit standpoint, would it be agreeable that that is a priority to get Mr. Root to address, is some sort of notification program or outline?
I agree.
So we'd have that as item number one, for example, of things we'd ask you to address.
I
Go
have two
ahead.
more items.
Okay?
Just looking at the proposed amendment in paragraph alpha. Second sentence says, "No parcel may be included within the scenic highway petition that is not contiguous to at least one or other parcel that is included in the scenic highway petition." I have no idea what that means. I think we should strike that sentence. And then, item Charlie, all persons owning a legal interest in the subjects must sign the petition. So here's what I would say for that one. I would say that one should say, all persons owning a contiguous property must sign the petition for the scenic highway designation. And you have contiguous properties defined in alpha. So that's just a start, I mean, as far as clarifying stuff. I think contiguous property in this case should be defined as, it has to be adjacent to the highway. Anybody adjacent to the highway has a legal interest.
And then the owner, just, if you just go, and I don't want to be broad just for the sake of being easier, but if you do say owner, it is easier. I mean, it is broader. You don't, they obviously have the legal interest, and then if there's some debate, if there's a family, like I'm the owner, you're the owner, well, they can have that debate. The county's not making a determination. They're representing themselves as the owner. And so we don't have to say, well, yeah, that legal interest qualifies.
And that basically says 100% participation.
But if you did, yeah, I didn't talk to that part, but yeah, if you did, if you asked for all owners, sure, it would be 100%.
So does that need to be clarified that each parcel only has one vote?
Well, if you're voting, yes, but
I mean,
yeah,
one-
as far as the applicant,
one-
one person sign off and
one
owner
signature.
per property, yes,
Yep.
that you have that, so you don't get, you know. And of course, this is gonna have a public hearing anyway, so it's
100%, it
adopted,
doesn't matter how many votes you've got.
adopted by ordinance. But I just think it's, like in annexations in the past, I had, you know, a lot of litigation in Charleston over those, and even with the 100% method, a lot of them were turned over because you have 100% on the petition, but, you know, somebody else has an interest in that property that qualified them to have a voice in it, and they didn't. So it may look like 100% and just turn out not to be that way. And I'm just going from annexations, and we were tearing down annexations that another entity had done. So
Undivided
our
half
purpose-
interests.
Was that?
Undivided half interests.
Any number of any number of ways that we could, kind of, but that was our goal, was to tear it down, so that's a different.
So it sounds like it worked well, flushing out those issues.
Yeah, for us,
Right.
yeah, I mean, we could definitely get to it with, you know, discovering, pinning down who the owners were, yeah.
Mr. Golan, you know,
Here's a question, how long should the road be? You know, should it be required, it has to be a mile? Should it be required, it can't be more than 2 miles? You know, I mean, just something about the length of the road, I think, needs to be, yeah, I don't know. I'm just saying that was one of the confusing things when we went through the process last time. It's like, oh, it must have been too long because we got more properties involved. You know, we should shorten it. But there was nothing there to say, it has to be at least a mile or, you know.
I think
So that's another,
yeah, I think that would be an item of importance for us to be continuing to try to wrap our arms around.
The other thing, I'm sorry, I just thought of it.
Yep.
Is, now I might be wrong, y'all correct me. It doesn't, if it is designated, it doesn't say specifically what will happen. Like there'll be a sign that says, you know, provided by the county that says scenic highway, and it might say for the next 2 miles, or it may not, but should we not say something about how it looks when someone sees that sign if we do require one to be provided. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say, oh, we've designated this as a scenic highway, and then as soon as someone puts something up, it's like, well, you didn't get permission to put that sign up, you know. You see what I'm saying? The other thing, I don't know if it would even need to be included, but, you know, it might need a sign that says you're at the end of the scenic highway, because there might be something that's very, you know, not appealing at some point, and they go, God, how could this be a scenic highway? You know, when if they saw a sign, they realize they've passed what was scenic.
My concern was, and I'm glad you segued to that, is that I think there was a lot of the consuming public that didn't understand that this designation didn't keep something looking the way it was looking today, and that tomorrow, all the trees could be cut and everything ground down, and it has zero to do with this ordinance. And I think that some of the public was missing that understanding.
In the case, can I break in for a second? In the case of Highway 130, there's one side of the road that's much more scenic than the other. And, you know, there are places where there's no trees for, say, 250 yards. Other places where it's only 50 yards and there's some trees. You don't really know what's on the other side of those trees. If they were to be cut down, maybe it wouldn't look very nice. But, I mean, I don't think this ordinance should go into any of that. If there is something that's scenic, you know, let people figure out what it is, you know, like the left side as you're driving north on 130, you know, in other words, the lake was the scenic part.
Mr. Coley, I want to ask you a question about our billboards and billboard ordinances in a second, but I wanted to make a statement before I do that, is we've talked about contiguous property owners. The highway itself and the right-of-way to either side of that highway is owned by the county if it's a county road. And so there is some say that somebody that doesn't necessarily live on it, but that does drive on it, has the right to have a voice because they're driving on the part that's actually being affected from curb to curb or right-of-way to right-of-way, because outside of the junkyard and outside of the billboards, it doesn't actually impact the property owner in its current form. So my question to Mr. Coley is, I've slept since then, and it's been a long time ago since we talked about billboard ordinances and things like that. What if we removed billboards and junkyards off of this altogether and let other aspects of our ordinances control?
I think that's a possibility as well. I mean, I would chuck some legal, but I don't see why you wouldn't be able to amend what is restricted by.
So just delete from those provisions, like in the junkyard ordinance, and so billboards and junkyards could be on scenic highways.
If we removed them out of the scenic highway and let the junkyard ordinance stand and let the billboard ordinance stand on its own rules, then all we're talking about is the right-of-way, the edges of the curb, and unless there was something added to this, which is still a concern, and my concern was back then, is that if this were a step up to a state designation, the state designation goes beyond the property line and into the view lanes potentially. And so this does not affect view lanes, this is just the edge of the property. So if we took out if we took out the restriction, it's no longer a zoning restriction, then it's simply a drive now, and at that point, do we need 100% or do we just need public opinion? It's just, you know, looking at the other side of that coin.
I think
to get
that's a good
somewhere.
compromise. I really do. And, you know, and the compromise to me is not include the restrictions for billboards and junkyards, but allow the community to decide, you know. And it still could be, you know, keyed in somehow to people who have property on that stretch, but I just don't think it needs to be 100%.
So going back to things for Mr. Root to work on. do we have any other items that we can ask him to take a look at? Or do we need to then come up with a couple of items that we need to, maybe not at this meeting, but at the next meeting, contemplate and actually put a vote to, as far as do we need this in there or not in there?
So I think Mr. Root had two questions, the who and.
Yeah, the who and the how we tell the who, and the other who's, and whoville, how, what's going on, and obviously, and who can apply. So, yeah, I can take a stab at putting it, but I think this runs the risk of, kind of with the junkyard ordinance, because it started to feel like I was directing things, and we'd have to circle back. Having the votes on those two issues and with direction on where y'all stand, obviously I can bring back the ordinance after y'all give me that direction by the planning commission. And y'all could change your minds. But having it that way I think that would keep us on more of a linear path to get it done. So we're not, obviously the junkyard ordinance took a while to get done. And I think that was because we had a lot of circling back. And
If the rights of the ordinance stop at the property line and has zero effect beyond the property line, then it is a whole county issue. The vote stays with this group as to where is the importance of this and why. Which we handled, I think, appropriately this last time. Will it be handled the same way in the future? I don't know. But if we were able to take out those two restrictions out of this, I think it does come back to a clean look. At the same time, I can't imagine this process without some sort of notification to it, element to it.
the junkyard reference to the scenic highways is in the junkyard ordinance. I thought the billboard one was in the billboard ordinance. So, I mean, we wouldn't be carving them out of this ordinance, at least as to the junkyard, just from pulling them out of the junkyard ordinance. So we'd be bringing that one back forward, which is fine. It's not a big hurdle. I just wanted to make sure you were talking about the same thing. So
I was actually saying remove it from this ordinance, the junkyard statement and the billboard statement out of this ordinance dealing with scenic highways.
Right, the junkyard, the correlation between the two, the cross-reference is between the ordinances. The junkyard ordinance says you can't have a junkyard in X feet from the scenic highway. So that's the scenic highway ordinance, unless I've already forgotten, doesn't reference the junkyard.
So you
Is
would,
that
you
a
would
state
cross-reference.
designated scenic highway or a
But
county
the state is
designated?
very keen on no junkyards, no billboards. I think that's where it came from. No, but ours is, the junkyard ordinance is where we carved it out and said X feet away from the scenic highway. It's not referenced in the scenic highway ordinance itself.
So it's a scenic highway designated either by the county or by the state is the way we would
These are
interpret
just
that?
yet, it can be designated either by the, are you talking about the junkyard ordinance?
Yeah, so if
Yeah, I
we,
think that was state, local state, or, let me see.
Here's the
I'm not just
definition.
guessing.
Okay.
Federal, state, or county jurisdiction is designated through legislation, ordinance, or other official declaration, so it would apply to the commercial junkyard designation based on the definition in chapter 32.
Which is a matter of just, if you want to go that route, then it's amending 32 for the commercial junkyards.
So and I apologize that I didn't bring the junkyard ordinance in, and I don't remember. Our junkyard ordinance itself contains language that says not on a scenic highway.
Yes.
Okay.
and so does the billboard ordinance?
Yes, that's my recollection. I
Same.
couldn't find it real quick.
That was the one I was looking for next.
Yeah. It used to be in the scenic highway ordinance. And I thought it still was.
Then it would be a matter of, Mr. Root, which comes first, potentially. But you lose the property right, though, if you designate it as a scenic highway, and there's another ordinance that would then take precedence, which goes to the 100%.
Yeah, you'd have to do them at the same time, and you'd have to amend 32 junkyard and this. It could be done.
I don't know that it would benefit removing it. I think it goes back to the 100%.
I think you would not want a junkyard on a scenic highway. You would not want, billboards really on Scenic Highway. So I don't see a reason to go in and amend that. I mean,
It just goes to the 100%.
I think you really need the 100%, so the community as a whole can agree and everybody's happy about the situation, versus creating a divide over something that is nothing more than a sign on the side of the road.
So can we give Mr. Root some items to then bring back to us that would be positive changes based on our discussion here? Or is there something that we need to propose internally that we need to vote on at the next meeting?
I think we've touched on a few things. We still haven't established the who.
I want to make a motion to give Mr. Root some things to work with. All right, I make a motion that we, and I'm gonna make a list, that we add a provision to notify the public. That we strike the second sentence in paragraph alpha, which I don't know what that sentence means. And that item Charlie is rewritten to reflect all persons owning a contiguous property to the proposed designated scenic highway. Something to that effect. Those are three things I think we need to include.
David, would you read out the second sentence that you want to strike?
No parcel may be included within the scenic highway petition that is not contiguous to at least one other parcel that is included in the scenic highway petition.
Right, so you couldn't have a skip between parcels along the highway.
I'm assuming the reason that's in there, Mr. Coley, is because that's how our zoning
It
change
matches-
is.
It does match the language in the small area rezoning.
That's my interpretation of that. So you couldn't have, a half a mile of parcels, a skip of a parcel, and then another half mile parcel.
But if it says all persons owning properties contiguous to the highway, scenic highway must sign the petition, why do you need that second sentence?
Clarification.
I think if you read it, or write it out and read it, it'll make more sense. But I think what Mr. Nix is talking about, if we can just make it contiguous to the highway, there's no segments that are left out. So there's no segmentation, scenic highway here, not scenic highway here. But it's just, everybody within the road length has to be contiguous to the road. And 100% of the people have to be on the application. If you went that route, then you don't have to worry about defining contiguity one property to another.
From a legal standpoint, then, do we need to put in a definition of distance? Or can I bring you an application that says, I want to make this a scenic highway the first half mile, and then I want to do another part of this as a scenic highway for 3/4 of a mile, and then there's one more last section over here, skipping the people that didn't want to approve it? Or do we need a distance minimum?
I think it's hard to do a distance in
Yeah,
Oklahoma
Highway
County.
11, how long is that? Because that's a scenic highway. That's a pretty long
I
highway.
do get
And then-
why that second sentence is in there for a blob of properties, but for a linear,
Right.
you don't need it.
Exactly right. That's what
I
want for
agree.
the small area.
You don't need it.
It does make sense. I thought about that, the same issue. I mean, if someone wants a scenic highway that's 1/10 of a mile long, and then a subsequent one, it does make a lot of sense to have a minimum distance for it, but I don't think we've ever run into the problem of someone trying to,
Right.
for whatever that's worth.
I mean, I hate to create something that's not a problem to begin with, and maybe that's where we have a say in the matter still. I don't know.
You do, and council, I mean, you make your recommendation, you say this is,
This really is real
It's
relevant. It's
mile.
200 yards long. It's not really relevant to what we're,
and we're
to
gonna
this.
we're gonna recommend county council that they don't pass it because it's too short. And so, I mean, there is that, and there will be that discretion.
Okay.
Between you all and then the county council, regardless.
Do you want to finish your motion, Mr. Nix?
I think I did.
Okay.
I listed 3 items, and I think Mr. Root captured them.
Do you have
Um,
somewhere where it says all landowners have to be notified? I mean, is that,
Yeah, it's 100%. That's what I wrote
Notify.
in with the C.
okay.
Of the notice, yes. We hadn't talked about notice, there was those 3 things. I was just planning on putting the notice in on my own motion. So, I'm kidding.
So, I will second
Never do that.
Mr. Nix's motion, since we've kind of already discussing it.
I'm just curious, would you be open to amendments to add additional, to the list?
We can talk about them.
Well, that's what I'm just wanting to see if you're open to it. So one of the things that I can see in this with this doesn't direct exactly the motion, but I do want to get it out because it's been talked about, is this idea of property ownership and getting 100%, okay? I can see a scenario where maybe someone has died and the property is in probate, or a corporation that's never been asked to sign a scenic highway petition before, and they're gonna have to take it to the board. And the board only meets once every 2 years. And, I mean, all kind of scenarios I can think of that would disrupt the common process that we think, oh, well, it's not gonna be a problem. But now it is because of these things that we don't foresee. So that's why I still want to make a case for not 100%, because, maybe we should make it where there's some type of process. If someone doesn't feel like they want to sign in on it, that they would have a separate petition so it's designated as when you're trying to make the decision, okay, we've got all these people saying yes, but we've got this other that had a chance to sign to say no. Right now, I don't think we have a provision in the process for people to say no, other than trying to attend a meeting and publicly saying it. So that's something we might want to include. And it may go to this list do you understand? Do y'all follow me where I was going with that? Do I need to answer some questions?
You're coming up with a way for people to say no, thank you. Is that what you're doing?
Well, I'm trying to determine, aren't there some good reasons not to have 100%? And I think that there are. And I'm also trying to come up with a solution for people who might be in that area who want to voice, officially, other than coming and speaking at a meeting, that they would be able to have this other provision in the process that would allow them to say, I disagree. I don't want it for these reasons,
Well, I have a few questions. So you were.
Could I just ask, is everybody understanding where I'm coming from on that before I move on?
Well, I don't. I have a few questions
Oh,
for you.
okay.
So your analogy is that there's a sense of urgency for the designation of the scenic highway, that we could not wait on the other family members in the case of a death to decide if they wanted to be involved in that or not. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. I
So
think
why
with
is the
process.
sense of urgency? I mean, is the highway going to change within 6 months or a year?
Well, the answer is yes, it could.
So then it shouldn't be
I mean,
designated.
it could be washed away by a natural disaster. To answer your question, the answer is yes, it could change. But I don't think of it as an urgency so much as there's a process in play once the application goes in or the public notice goes out. And it's not reasonable to wait, when everyone else is ready, for someone who says, I don't know, it might be, this thing, my cousins are involved now. I might not be able to get this thing probated for another 2 years. I can just imagine what we could fall into. I'm trying to make a pretty valid case for, we don't need 100%. because it could cause problems. And another thing, Mr. Haney, that you mentioned is everyone's gonna be happy if there's 100%. Well, I have to take exception to that. There are a lot of people in the community that aren't excited about our decision not to create a scenic highway on 130 right now. They're dissatisfied.
But is there 100% dissatisfied?
No, I'm sure.
Okay, there we go.
Well, that's not valid. You were making a case that if all the property owners are okay with it, then the community is happy.
No, I was saying the property owners will be happy, the ones.
Well, you didn't say it, you said the community.
Oh.
So maybe it's just a difference.
So the other question is, that I had, dealing with the ability to say no. If we are sending out a notification to all of the property owners that are affected along that highway, if they did not sign that petition, would that not essentially be them saying no?
No, it wouldn't be. It's not the same thing.
Well, I disagree with you there, but okay.
Reason is, someone forgot. They got a notice in the mail, but they're really busy, and they forgot. That's just one example. I could come up probably 10 more if you give me a little more time.
I do think that the 100% is a correct but very tight threshold. But if you go less than 100%, the challenge with going less than 100%, using the example of 130, and again, not trying to put this back to a 130 scenario, because this is a county thing, is that by far the largest property owner, the one property owner, owned more property than anybody else in that stretch. I think it would be unfair of us if that was the holdout to say, well, we don't need 100%. When he's the highest impact is that large volume property owner.
Well, maybe
So
this
if
should
we
be
went
tight.
less than 100%, we'd have to put some sort of impact, and I don't know that we can do that without it coming back to us simply voting. I don't know.
That's one of the things I like to say is
One thing you
good.
get with 100% is no discrimination. You don't, it's harder for them to make a legal case against the county. That's the whole reason you use 100%.
We have three things that you can work on right now, is that correct?
Yes, or four, with the notice provisions, if y'all pass this motion that's up presently. I don't know, did Mr. Gall make a motion to amend, or is it just discussion?
I didn't make a motion to amend. I was trying to fill out the group to see if they thought what I was bringing up was valid. And if they feel like it is, we could come up with something to include it.
One other thought I had I'm not saying this is a better option, it's just another way that something similar has been done in other situations was you could, as opposed to tying it to ownership, you could tie it, as long as applicants owning property that comprises 90% of the linear distance of the road apply. So that takes care of your large property owner. If you got this one guy who owns 50% of linear feet, and he's like, nah, then it doesn't work. But it's still not requiring 100%. It's just a thought.
I think that's a good compromise.
Difficult to administer, but I know it's difficult to figure out 100%, which makes sense, or less, which makes sense.
Could you come back to us with potentially the things that you've got now with just a side note of that for us to, because this isn't a one and done meeting.
Yeah, I'll just do it 100%. I'll just do that as a menu one. I'll just do the options below that.
I'd like to make a point of order. My point of order is, I have a motion on the floor. I don't know if it's been seconded or not.
I
It's been
seconded
seconded?
it.
Okay, so Mr. Gollin had an amendment to that motion.
That did not have a second.
I never had an
There was
amendment.
no motion.
Yeah, it was
It wasn't a
discussion.
formal motion.
Never a-
It was part of the
never-
Just
conversation.
during
Discussion.
discussion. Discussion.
Okay, all right. So I think where we are right now is we have a motion on the floor
With 3 items.
with 3 items.
Yeah.
Do we want to call the question on that? motion?
Can
Or do we need to discuss that some more?
My question is could he make a fourth note? Not that that's part of the motion. It would have to be amended for him to be given instruction to do so. But is that something he would be willing to do, is my question to him, is to put that just as a, hey, here's some other things that you may want to consider. As he was making this document, going, I still don't have an answer to this, guys, kind of a statement. Is that something that you want to?
I don't have anything other than the 3 items that I proposed.
Could you possibly allow for an amendment that offers a number 4 that would give Mr. Root a little flexibility and this is what the amendment would be, is, and any other things that might be helpful to the process that we're in changing this ordinance.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you at all.
But what I'm saying
wants to hear.
is that I think there needs to be, I mean, this is, to me, maybe further than we need to go, because I would love it if Mr. Johnson would work directly with Mr. Root and just, let's kind of get to the nuts and bolts of this thing, and it not just be 3 things. So that's why this number 4 amendment would allow for some give and take and what makes sense with Mr. Cooley and other people. So,
Right now, our motion is for these 3 things. I agree that I would like to give Mr. Root, if he sits there and goes, gosh, I still don't have an answer to this, that he's able to make a note that says, I still don't have an answer to this, guys.
Yeah, I will do that as a matter of course. Anyways, yeah, I'll leave the blank, say, we gotta address this, and I will, if you say so, if you amend the motion or pass a subsequent motion, then for the percentage, I will give the menu option, at least with another option. If not, we'll stick just 100%, and that will be as it is.
Mr. Nix, you made the motion, so it's your call.
well, it's not just Mr. Nick's call. I mean,
Well, it's his call as to how the motion is structured.
well, I mean, whether or not we accept the motion as is or it's amended is whether or not my proposal for a number 4 amendment is seconded. And it hadn't been seconded yet. So if it's not going to be seconded, then it's a neat point. But if it gets a second, then it needs to be voted on.
As I understand it right now, Mr. Root has said that he's got 3 items, actually a 4th because of the notification that he wants to put in there. And that is our hard and fast motion that is currently on the table that we're about to vote on. Mr. Root has also said he would be willing to put down some things as he comes up with, we really need to address this and to include that. And my question is do we need to amend the motion to allow Mr. Root to add anything that he sees relevant beyond the 4 items we've listed?
So if Mr. Gollin's motion is add a provision for Mr. Root to come up with, I don't even know how to say it.
Other things.
What you really want is, you want the ordinance written to where we don't require 100% participation. And I'm not in with that.
And I'm not saying that that's
Yeah,
the
that's not
direction
what my
we should
amendment
go.
was.
That may be,
I think you misunderstand, Mr. Nix, with all due respect. My amendment was to allow Mr. Root to include all other things that he thinks might be viable to getting us to where we want to go.
He does that anyway when he writes the ordinance, when he works with the chairman or with the staff or with the council. He does that already. We're just giving him a specific items that we want him to include. And then he goes off and he drafts it up. If he has any questions, he gets back with Mr. Johnson.
And
I don't see,
is that a correct assessment?
it is.
Okay.
I think it's different than I think where Mr. Gollin was going, where I put out some menu of maybe policy options, which I'm not, that's why the joke on my own motion, I'm not, it's not my lane. But I will catch the legal issues. I'll make, call outs where we need to address a point. And obviously, it'll be written as if this motion passes as 100%. And then y'all can take that up. You will at least have it established in what you're talking about. And you can say, no, we want to tweak this to 90% by road lineage, or we want 75% of ownership, or whatever. At least you'll have that placeholder, and you can go off from there. Probably makes the most sense.
I do think this gives us some bone structure to be working from. Is there any more discussion on it? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
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 It's unanimous.
All right. We have one more thing on the agenda. Let me see if I can get to it here. There is a name change, as I understand it, that Mr. Root is going to tell us about, that is a road name, that we have a road duplicate or something of that nature. And it'll either be addressed by Mr. Collier or Mr. Root. But first, Mr. Markovich has the floor for public comments.
Thank you. I may not fully understand where this agenda item is coming from, but I just want to say this. That I got the impression that it was going to be talking about the process of name changes. But one thing that I think is imperative, and I don't think often gets looked at closely enough, is that there is a phenomenal, in some cases, financial impact on the people that are living on a particular road, and all of a sudden that road changes. And especially if they operate a business on any one of these given roads, and they have to begin changing everything. And so that's just, I hope that is something that people will keep in mind. It can be a huge financial impact on the people who are impacted by road change. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coley, you wanted this on the agenda. It's my understanding there was a developer that had a name or something to that effect. Could you explain what the process is for denying?
Yeah, so our GIS office has identified a subdivision road and a failed subdivision. So this road was originally supposed to be a loop road, come all the way back around and go back out. In this failed subdivision, they did not build the entire loop, so it's going in two directions with one road name. There are some existing houses on one side of it, and then someone has recently purchased a parcel on the other side. So this would be the first home on that road. And it's a potential issue because there's gonna be naming in two different directions on two different roads that have the same name. So that is gonna be coming up probably in March or April on your agenda. And while we have Mr. Root here tonight, we just wanted to go over what the actual planning commission's role is in that road renaming once the road has already been named. So that's kind of where we are. And Mr. Markovich is absolutely right that there are considerable considerations for somebody, especially if there's a lot of people that already live on a road, where they would have to be changed. It can be quite onerous. So.
And why is it March as the timeline for this coming
I
up?
think that's when I talked to Nick kind of briefly, and he's identified it as the problem that's gonna be coming up. We just need to get it fixed, and that was kind of the timeline I was given, so.
Okay.
If we can get it for next month, I'd be happy to, but I think it's gonna be March realistic.
So, Mr. Root, I understand there's a process in doing this and all of that, and you're here to help us maybe.
It's relatively straightforward. It just hasn't come to y'all. We haven't had the name change, but as James articulated, this is a situation where you need it. Just, it comes from GIS, our addressing to you all. He sends a package of all the information that's relevant to you all. A public hearing is scheduled 15 days notice, so y'all hold a public hearing in that case, and then you make a decision on the road name change. This is a situation where, I've talked to before where y'all kind of sit in a quasi-judicial place or extra administrative space, and this is one of those situations that you don't.
Is there an alternative name suggested that's brought to us, or is that part of our call, or are we simply to say, no, it can't be named what it's currently named?
It'll be brought to you. The things that are within the road naming policy, which it has a lot in it, so make sure y'all have a copy. But the citizens who request a name change have to propose a justification, articulate the justification for the name change, show the tax map numbers of the properties affected, have a map of the area, and submit 3 proposed road names for consideration for the change. And then have signatures of 75% of the property owners affected by the name change, and then pay the fee, whatever fee we have, the budget's allocated to that.
So someone's gonna come to us with signatures, with suggested recommendations of what they would like it named, with everybody saying, yeah, we wanna do this, or no, we don't, or I'd like to name it Osmer Osmakoski, or
It's
whatever.
supposed to go, GIS will have a package, it sends that to you all, then the staff will coordinate, the public will get it on the agenda, have a public hearing, and y'all have a decision time.
Very good. So there's nothing for us to vote on with regard to that, it's just instructions for today, for tonight. So, that concludes the agenda for the
I
evening.
move we adjourn.
All in favor? Thank you.